What's up, guys? Connor O'Hanlon here for another episode of the Greater Society podcast. And today we have a weird mishmash of things going on as I'm quickly putting out stuff to the Discord. For those who are watching, you might be seeing me a little more crazy than normal. And those listening, you might be confused as to why I am in shambles. But to say that I just got home would be an understatement. So it's 7:30, 7:35. The show normally starts at 7. Why is that, and what is the plan going forward? Before we dive into what is going on in the news and the current events and all that stuff, I just want to get it up front that I started a new job this week. It's in person every single day, and it is during tax season already. So with those things changing, the show is going to have to adjust time frame wise. So sometimes it's going to be 7, sometimes it's going to be 7:30, sometimes it might be 8. The show will continue on regardless. One way or the other, I prepare and I listen to enough stuff and I read enough stuff every week that I can put the show together. But sometimes it's going to be shorter, sometimes it'll be normal. But just so we have a heads up as to like why I'm running around and why I'm dressed up wearing like a golf shirt is not normal. I don't normally dress up. I don't like dressing up. Even when I campaign, I don't like dressing up. But just so everyone's on the same page, knowing what to expect. This is the way it's going to be. But today we're going to be diving into quite the plethora of things. And the thing is like I would say over the last week or so, there hasn't been as much like one giant news story as there typically is. I feel like it has been like a mishmash of small things here and there, and we're going to explore that, starting with Biden documents discussion, why that's different from the Trump documents discussion. That's kind of what I want to talk about up front here. Going to talk quickly about Greta Thunberg getting arrested, doing a climate protest in Germany. I'm going to see if I can quickly try to pull up a cool and funny video. Funny for different reasons, but and then I'm going to talk about what I'm calling the Republican Tomfoolery Medley, which is a mishmash of different Republican nonsense, basically, that has happened over the last week or so. And that's going to be like a super cut of different videos and topics, because there's been a lot. And then the last thing, I'm not going to discuss it too much because we've kind of continued to discuss the Central Bucks School Board, but I'm going to provide and showcase a link to a article written by 3 of the school board members countering what has passed and what was talked about on last week's episode, which is Policy 321. And you can go check out the clip that we put out earlier this week on Monday if you missed that. You can go learn about what happened with Policy 321 on the YouTube channel. So, with that being said, we're going to dive right into the Biden Documents Fiasco and what is going on there, how is this happening, and why are Democrats being hypocrites? And I'm saying that facetiously because there is some level of I would say that there is some level of similarity, and to ignore that would be stupid. But let's just dive into what we're talking about here. So, for those who recall, back in, I believe, November of 2022, so far back ago, that Mar-a-Lago was raided because Donald Trump, the former president, was holding classified documents in his residence and refused to give them back. There were hundreds of documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago at different variations of classified level. So with that, we fast forward to these past 2 weeks or so, and information has come out about documents that have been found, and I would say dozen, like singular dozen, maybe dozens at this point, like 15, some change, of documents have been found at the Biden residence, at the Biden, different Biden houses, I should say, next to his Corvette, of course, because what are you, an old white dude without a fancy Corvette or a fancy car? And the thing is that the way that we found out about these documents in Biden's residence was not through his the FBI raiding his house, which some people find hypocritical, but rather because his lawyers found the documents, turned them over, and informed the appropriate officials of it. Now, why is this different? Why am I not saying this is a big deal? And you can go back and you can look at what I said when Donald Trump's house, well, Mar-a-Lago, it's not supposed to be his house, but it is where he lives. His residence, let's say, was raided. Why is this different? You can go back and listen to what I had to say there. I was not ringing the alarm bells saying, oh, he's doing all this crazy nonsense. All I was saying is there is probable suspicion as to why Donald Trump refused to return the documents. There is suspicion there when asked to return them. The thing is you could say, and you can give plausible deniability if we're being generous to Biden and Trump. You can say that there is plausible deniability that the documents were taken while president and vice president for Biden, respectively, which both of them have the authority to declassify documents. We just had them, and they were lost. They were lost in transit kind of thing, and we're returning them. But Donald Trump, unlike Biden, refused to return the documents when asked, and thus the raid was necessary to be conducted. Biden's lawyers, who find these documents, turn them over. Now, there is the line of, well, they keep finding more documents, because even this week they found more documents. So Republicans, and we're going to watch a clip here in a second, and so Republicans call for a investigation. We must and they always say must investigate the investigators, right? But and what's kind of crazy is that you're seeing committee positions, and we're not going to dive into too much of it, but Republicans getting committee positions where they don't even believe. It's like the same thing where like they don't believe in the IRS. They're voting to defund the IRS. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But they want to investigate Biden for the documents that he had, although they didn't want to investigate Trump. They didn't want to execute a search warrant on Trump. So then they try to call hypocrisy on people like me or other progressives or other Democrats and say, well, how come you don't want to investigate Joe Biden? My answer to that is we should investigate Joe Biden. We should investigate these documents. We should look into why they were out there. We should look into what is the severity of these documents and why are well, first of all, again, I said this with the Mar-a-Lago raid. Why are certain things classified? There are certain things that necessarily shouldn't be classified, but if they are, and if there's a process to handle these documents, and I think we should begin looking at the process to handle these documents a little bit more seriously if we want to talk about moving forward, and just the access to information getting out to foreign officials, which is what people were alluding to, and there's still some level of suspicion with what Trump was doing with those documents that he had. Information not leaking, but literally being given to foreign officials by a president or a former president, and what that could do to the national security apparatus. And yes, as is pointed out in the chat, Biden is complying and not complaining about it. His lawyers are actually handling it and giving the documents over, no questions asked. It's just one of those things where if we want to, if someone is trying to prove Democrats are being hypocritical, there is no hypocrisy when the documents are found, they're turned over. They're not being, it doesn't take the Attorney General to ask for them. It doesn't take the FBI raiding into Biden's Corvette, stealing his Corvette, eating ice cream in his Corvette, driving around with documents flying out of him. That is not how this is happening. They are complying with what is being asked. So, what we have here is Republican Congressman Jake, what is this guy? No, not Jake. James Comer, not Comey, Comer, who is a Republican congressperson from Kentucky, being interviewed by Jake Tapper on CNN in a, I would say, somewhat rare, tough interview from CNN. And I think there is some changing dynamics there. There's some good, some bad, but Jake Tapper has been a bit of a shining light, I would say, in the and we've covered a couple of clips from him recently, holding Republicans' feet to the fire. So here we have James Comer being interviewed and grilled a little bit by Jake Tapper.
Documents. Former President Trump is under an investigation for his own classified documents. There are about 20 in the case of Biden. For Trump, there are more than 300 classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. A big difference here, just on the facts, Trump did not fully
Just to address a question in chat, has there been any talk of what docs Trump or Biden actually had? The thing is that the level of complexity with the classified documents is where you get into the complexity. So there's the, we all know, like, there are different levels of classified information, you know, top secret, all this stuff. They have code words for it, and I don't know them off the top of my head. The thing is, once they're classified, unless they are declassified and released into public record, we as civilians won't necessarily know what they are. People can allude to it, and I think maybe someday we'll know, but we don't know if it's nuclear documents. We don't know if it's just classified as to, like, what, you know, the dog in the White House likes to eat for dinner, because the level of classification for presidential records, although presidential records have to be kept, the classification is kind of all over the place as to, like, what is classified and what is not classified.
Go there, because you're talking about the Trump documents. Former president, there are more than 300 classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. A big difference here, just on the facts, Trump did not fully comply with the subpoena. His lawyers falsely told investigators that they turned everything in. Take a listen to what you told CNN about this situation last November.
I don't know much about that. That's not something that we've requested information just to see what was going on, because I don't know what documents were at Mar-a-Lago. So, you know, that's something we're just
Mar-a-Lago
waiting to see what comes out on that.
But is it fair to say that investigation won't be a priority?
That will not be a priority.
So,
and this is the guy that's the chair of the Oversight Committee, for those just listening.
What do you say to viewers who don't understand why President Biden's documents seem like a big priority for you, but President Trump, who took hundreds more documents, did not comply with the subpoena, did not reach out to the National Archives or the Justice Department to say, hey, we found these documents? It's not a priority. Do you only care about classified documents being mishandled when Democrats do the mishandling?
The short answer for him is yes.
Absolutely not. Look, we still don't know what type of documents President Trump had. That's one of the questions we've asked National Archives. Just because Joe Biden's lawyers said they turned over 5 documents doesn't mean they just turned over 5 documents. They could have turned over 500 documents. I'm sorry, but I don't have a lot of confidence in President Biden's personal lawyers. At the end of the day, the National Archives implied to us.
I'm sorry, I have to just pause it there because I'm laughing, because let's remember who Donald Trump's lawyers were. Specifically, there was one that might stand out to you. The former America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani. So if that's the bar for what a good lawyer is, then I'm sorry, then I have to probably guess that Biden's lawyers are significantly better.
At former Chairman Maloney's request, and told us that the National Archives.
Remember, Chairman Maloney, who lost his re-election.
Archives was working with the Trump administration during the transition. That's the last communication we had with whether or not the archives had worked with Trump on removal of all the documents from the White House. So we don't know exactly what Trump has versus what Biden has. At the end of the day, my biggest concern isn't the classified documents, to be honest with you. My concern is how
Hunter
there's such a
Biden's
discrepancy
laptop.
and how former President Trump was treated by raiding Mar-a-Lago, by getting the security cameras, by taking pictures of documents on the floor, by going through Melania's closet, versus Joe Biden. They're like, okay, your personal lawyers who don't have security clearance, they can go through, they can just keep looking and keep looking and determine whatever's there. That's not equal treatment, and we're very concerned. And there's a lack of trust here at the Department of Justice by House Republicans. That's the outrage.
So I get that, but there's a big difference in how President Biden and his team reacted and how President Trump and his team reacted. The FBI searched Mar-a-Lago because Trump, for more than a year, refused to turn over documents to the National Archives and the Justice Department, which was trying to get them back into secure hands. Trump and his lawyers lied about it. Trump lied about not having classified documents, did not keep them in a secure location, did not comply with a subpoena, but said he had. And that search warrant, which Trump forced out into the open through his legal machinations, that cited laws that Trump might have violated, including the espionage.
So my Twitter's obviously acting up, but that's the most of the clip that you need to see there. We're gonna oh boy, when we get to the Republican medley, you guys are gonna be one after another seeing some crazy clips. But the crux of this in the end is the difference is cooperation and following the law, following what the FBI, the Attorney General, or any other law enforcement agency, whether it be an oversight committee from the Senate or the House, etc., is asking of you, and following that rule set. Now, what also is important to note, and kind of overlooked in all of this, because some of these documents, and I think all of them, are documents that are kind of left over from when Biden was vice president, is that technically speaking, if you really want to get technical, because Biden is the president right now, he could declassify them at any point. Now, that doesn't excuse the fact necessarily, but it is, it does point out, something that is not really looked at here. But in the end, it's not that big of a deal for either, honestly. The bigger part is the obstruction of justice, which keeps happening from Trump. And the blatant disregard for, quote, law and order from Republicans and from Trump himself, and the continued disintegration and undermining of the legal system and the legal process as we, as they disregard subpoenas and just do whatever the hell they feel like they can and they want to. But with that, I wanted to quickly talk about Greta Thunberg, which is always interesting to say because everyone says Thunberg, but Thunberg because she is Scandinavian, I believe. So the Viking blood in combating climate change is great to see. And I want to see, while I am talking to you about this, if I can see the oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it. It's gonna be so unfortunate if I can't find it. Oh man, let me see. Come on, I'm checking a DM. Oh, all right, probably not gonna be able to, but there was in this protest, there was a funny scene, like, I'll be honest with you, of some officers that are, you'll see them kind of walking her out. I'll show you here. So you'll see her getting walked out. This is, of course, staged, fake, all this stuff, right? The right-wingers are going to go crazy about this stuff. It's not actually fake. It's not staged. What they're doing is what they usually do when you're arrested protesting is like something like this. They're not going to like manhandle people. They're not going to toss you around. They are taking pictures and videos of her because she's famous, the same way that you would if you got arrested on the Capitol or whatever. And not storming the Capitol, of course, but if you got arrested protesting something just. But just Greta's tweet here. Yesterday, I was a part of a group that peacefully protested the expansion of a coal mine in Germany. We were kettled by police and then detained but were let go later that evening. Climate protection is not a crime. So what happens here is that this coal mine production and the production of coal and gas and oil in Europe, but specifically in Germany, has had to ramp up in response to the war in Ukraine because Russia has stopped providing gas to the Western world, and because Germany was reliant on Russian gas, that's why you see them changing their supply chain for energy, and because they're trying to become energy independent, because remember that Germany is not a liberal haven, it is not a leftist haven. It is largely governed by neoliberal centrists at best, and they are just reverting to coal, gas, oil, rather than looking at renewables in many cases, like we should be doing, on top of looking at, frankly, and this is something that we don't talk about enough, and I think maybe someone like Greta would disagree with me, but I think if we are to be pragmatic in looking at climate change in the interim period, we have to look at nuclear as an option as well, even if it's a shorter term investment into it to transition us. Now, people talk about decarbonizing and doing all that stuff while also not utilizing nuclear. But the fact is that nuclear is cleaner than coal. Gas and fracking cause issues long after the actual fracking occurs. It's not the fracking, the burning of the gas necessarily, that's always the largest methane or carbon emitter either. That's something that we don't talk about. But fracking, the ground actually leaks, and that's what releases methane into the atmosphere, amongst many other things. But nuclear has better ways of being disposed of than it did 30, 40 years ago. Of course it does, because that's what science has brought us. But we have not found ways to fully decarbonize or process the carbon in the air and methane in the air in the same way that would reduce climate change significantly. So the real goal is to get on electric cars, electric trains, etc., buses, whatever, transportation broadly. But people doing stuff like this, where you're being arrested in a coal mine or next to a coal mine, or the thing is that there's these police officers and they were getting stuck in the mud, and there was this guy that was dressed like a wizard, and I couldn't find it quickly. That's what happens when you have to start the show, after you get home with like 30 seconds to spare from when you get out of the, like, I still have my shoes on from work, which I don't normally wear shoes in my house, but do it for the fans. So that's like a very quick little thing looking at Greta getting arrested. It's nothing. It's honestly nothing like shocking, because I think we expect people to get arrested for activism, and it's not that big of a deal. I don't think, but it is cool to see a young person making change consistently. Now, this is where we're going to have what I would call, quote, fun. And this is how we're also going to continue. I'm going to continue to plow through the show without too long of diatribes and tangents is by knowing that I have a bunch of clips that I want to show and react to, and I also want to eat dinner. So this is where we're going to go speed round of the Republican tomfoolery medley. This is going to start with something that we didn't talk about in previous episode, when we were talking about George Santos. I'll just say that. He has been caught in a number of lies, lying about his Jewish heritage, lying about going to college, lying about being on the volleyball team at college, lying about working for Citibank, lying about his mom being in New York City. That came out today on 9/11. The list kind of goes on and on and on. Not ever disclosing that he was married previously, even though he is admittedly gay, which, again, we've talked about in the previous episode. They're not mutually exclusive, but to not, ever mention it in 2 congressional campaigns is kind of out there. Now, the one thing that everybody was saying in reaction to all of this was, he can't possibly be lying about his own name, could he? And this is where those people are potentially, because like all these other things, nobody actually knows who this guy is, which is a problem. Nobody knows where this guy got his money, which is a problem. Nobody knows what this guy's real name is. Here's a clip from 2019 where George Santos, Republican elected congressperson who has committee seats, by the way, introducing himself at a Brandon Straka, who started this organization called Walk Away, which is a thing that he did with Candace Owens and a bunch of other right-wingers to walk away from the Democratic Party. He is at an event. He's in the crowd with that guy, and you'll see Blair White, who is a right-wing trans, anti-trans person, anti-LGBTQ person, racist person, etc. At this event, introducing himself not as George Santos, but as Anthony Devolder.
Yeah, we're the haters.
Oh, you gotta be here.
So my name is Anthony Devolder. I'm a New York City resident. I recently founded a group called United for Trump, so if you guys want to follow, that would be awesome. My question's directed for both Blair and
there he is.
Brandon. Well, Brandon.
This is your guy. This is Anthony Devolder. George Anthony Devolder Santos. There he is. He started United for Trump, which is also, the question here is not going to really matter. What matters here is that he lied. On top of this, I want to see, hold on, let me make sure that I don't know if I pulled any tweets for this, because remember, my medley is quite expansive here. So here is the article from the Washington Post talking about how George Santos has previously stated that his mother was inside one of the World Trade Center towers on 9/11, but immigration records indicate that Santos' mother wasn't in the United States on that day. Liar. Also pointed out in chat, yeah, he said that he was Jewish. He wasn't Jewish, he was Jew-ish. Oh, man. Oh, here it is. Okay. This is a clip of Anthony Devolder's George Anthony Devolder Santos, his former roommate, who knew him as Anthony Devolder, talking about a scam that Sir Anthony pulled while he was his roommate.
How long did you actually live together?
We were only roommates for a few months, and I also knew him as Anthony Zabrowski.
So you knew.
So not only was he Anthony Devolder, he was Anthony Zabrowski. Now, maybe that plays into the Jewish. So sometimes he might be Jewish, and sometimes he might be Italian, and sometimes he might be, who knows, Hispanic. Sometimes he might just be regular white guy. Sometimes he might just be some, alien species. Who knows? But George Zabrowski, now he has a different plan for what he wants to do in this world.
Knew him. Why did he say he had two names then?
Well, he used Zabrowski for his Friends of Pets United, his GoFundMe, and he would say, "Oh well, the Jews will give more if you're a Jew," and so that's the name he used for his GoFundMes.
And what was he having
Not even phased, by the way. Not phased whatsoever.
GoFundMes for back then?
He had a pet charity, Friends of Pets United.
Friends of Pets United.
It was supposedly to help out with sick animals and
Dogs.
things like that. There's actually just an article released from one of my reporters who's been interviewing me a lot, Jacqueline Sweet, about how he conned a homeless military vet out of $3,000 for his service dog.
So, for those who don't know that story, George Anthony Zabrowski Devolder Santos conned a military veteran out of $3,000 using a GoFundMe to utilize the person's status as a homeless person to raise money to help the dog that the person had get to a vet. And then once the money was raised, he told the guy that the money, that the dog could not be helped, and thus he is not giving him the money. And he scammed that person. This is Republicans letting this guy take the seat in Congress. This is the New York Democratic Party failing over and over again. Now, maybe it's because nobody knew who George Santos was. They were looking for Anthony Devolder or Anthony Zabrowski or George Zabrowski or George Devolder, some combination. Who knows what his real name is? This is the absurdity of letting this guy take a seat in the House of Representatives. This is the absurdity of the Republican Party at this point. What the hell is going on in this party? So I'm going to go to the next part of our medley here, and that is the potential challenger to Donald Trump for the presidency of the United States, Ron DeSantis. And I'm going to read this tweet one for one for you. And I'm going to preface this. Those of you that have any interest in education, any interest in history, any interest in African American history, any interest in world history, any interest in educating the youth past a Eurocentric viewpoint of the world, any interest in looking at the world in any other way other than your own viewpoint, are going to laugh, scoff, be angry, be sad at this, because but you're not going to be surprised, because Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has blocked the AP African American history course from being taught in Florida schools, citing that it is, quote, significantly lacks educational value. So what happens here, and for those who maybe of an older generation that didn't go to school, and I don't know how it was, 30, 40 years ago, but AP classes are college level courses that you can take in high school, and they can count towards college credits. So as a way to save money, first of all, but second of all, to actually have a furthering of your education in high school beyond just the, here is a map of the world. Can you point out where Zimbabwe is? Here is a textbook about World War II. Who is Hirohito? And that stuff's important. But diving deeper into certain things and looking at the aspects of history and the aspects through a different lens, some might say a critical lens, and that's where this lies, is that's where it catches his attention, is because this would be critical race theory, where if you look at the world through any lens other than a straight white man from a 50-year-old man's perspective like DeSantis, then it is critical race theory, and we have to strike it down because, God forbid, we teach kids what happened in this country and how, frankly, African Americans were brought to this country and what 400 years, 350, 400 years of slavery did. That is a part of our history, and we have to be able to address it and look at it. And African American history, by the way, isn't just the history of slavery. You can look at heroes of history through an African American lens. It doesn't have to be bad. This is what's crazy. You can learn about people like MLK in an unfiltered fashion, because remember that Martin Luther King Day was this week, where every Republican wanted to wrap themselves in the "I have a dream" speech, but they would conveniently leave out the democratic socialist values that MLK had and why he was assassinated right after protesting for Vietnam, against Vietnam, the Vietnam War, and protesting to help sanitation workers unionize and get better wages and better representation and get people of color into the unions. That way they previously were not allowed to be into. Oh, but of course we can't teach African American history because that's spooky. You can't teach about Malcolm X and MLK and their conflicting ideas and what came out of that, and how you can't even talk about how Malcolm X in his autobiography wrote about how he was sitting with Coretta Scott King and talking about how he needed Martin Luther King the same way that Martin Luther King needed him. They played off of each other in a certain way, and they built towards something bigger because of their personas. You can't talk about Fred Hampton being assassinated because that's critical race theory. And you can't talk about it all because the triggered right-wingers will do this. Now, of course, I can't have only one critical race theory spooky. I have to go to this bozo in Arkansas. And yes, I do mean bozo, because Mike Huckabee was an absolute bozo. But this is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Mike Huckabee's daughter, who is now remember, this was the Donald Trump press secretary who blatantly lied day in, day out to the American people in Arkansas, home of former President Bill Clinton, talking about critical race theory and banning it preemptively in Arkansas.
About the fact that you're now growing up in the house, or your kids will grow up in the house where you grew up. Now that you're the governor, you have a different bedroom this time around, but it sounds like your daughter's going to grow up in the space you did as well. You hit the ground running this week after your inauguration. A number of executive orders. Some folks love them, some folks do not. Let's talk about your critics' reaction to some of these orders. One of them is called Executive Order to Prohibit Indoctrination and Critical Race Theory in Schools. The House Minority Leader there in Arkansas, a Democrat, says this: "We can't support our teachers if we alienate and insult them with headline-grabbing executive orders." She says CRT is not.
Wow, this almost sounds like the exact same thing that would have probably been written about the Central Bucks School District here in Bucks County, which is supposed to be a great school district.
Not being taught in Arkansas schools. Axios seems to back her up. They said, reality check, there's no indication that the college-level course is taught in any Arkansas public school. So if that's...
Yeah, see? Not taught in Arkansas public schools. Remember that African-American history is also not critical race theory, by the way. Critical race theory is its own analysis of the world through critical theory, utilizing race as the lens. They're not the same thing.
That's true. Why the executive order?
It's incredibly important that we do things to protect the students in our state. We have to make sure that we are not indoctrinating our kids and that these policies and these ideas never see the light of day. We should never teach our kids to hate America or that America is a racist and evil country. In fact, it should be the exact opposite. We know for a fact that the Federal Department of Education issued CRT guidance and policies to every school district in the country. Our job is to protect the students, and we're going to take steps every single day to make sure we do exactly that. And that's the reason I signed the executive order. I'm proud of the fact that we're taking those steps, and we're going to continue to do it every single day that I'm in office.
So here's the thing. Indoctrination would not be teaching kids what has happened, what has not happened in this country. Indoctrination would not be looking at the Reagan presidency with a critical eye and saying, hey, maybe some of this supply side economics is kind of hogwash. Maybe looking at, you know, I'll even say, even at in my grad school in economics class, we're talking about, I have an economics class with application to public policy. We talk about the surplus under Bill Clinton. And maybe as a high school student, you should learn that a federal government, specifically the United States, running a surplus is not necessarily the best thing for an economy. You can learn that stuff in a classroom setting. It doesn't mean that you hate capitalism. It doesn't mean that you hate the America. It doesn't mean that you're grooming or indoctrinating kids to a certain ideological perspective. All that it means is you are teaching them what happened in this country, or you're teaching them about policy, or you're teaching them with some sort of application. Indoctrination is blindly following and, you know, giving your allegiance to a nationalist ideology. That is indoctrination, and saying uncritically that, I just love everything about America without criticism, without any sort of perspective that says you know what? This is why I get so mad about this stuff. Is because as a patriotic progressive, I believe that America is great, but we should be doing greater things. We should not be striving to be 200th place. We shouldn't be striving to be 10th place in you know, when we come into these healthcare analyses and there's 14 countries, we shouldn't be, when we're looking at 14 countries' systems, we shouldn't be aiming to be 14th. We should be aiming to be first. We should be looking to be the best at education, the best at healthcare, the best at reducing wealth inequality. That is what we should want to do. You should be proud of yourself for trying to make your country better and trying to help your fellow countrymen and trying to help young kids learn about the past, because if you don't know about the past, you are doomed to repeat it. And that is what these folks don't care to talk about or address, because they don't believe that it matters. They don't believe that the history of Jim Crow matters. They don't believe that the Tulsa race riots matter. They don't believe that the internment camps with Japanese people matter. They don't want you to know about any of this stuff. I mean, FDR is my favorite president. I should still know about that stuff during World War II. Like, that is vital to really understanding how we engage and interact with the world around us. Social media, current events, the news, politics, history, all intertwines. So this BS about indoctrination in schools is not even close to happening. You could talk about in college, but at least in college there's choice in what classes you take, and there's choices in what majors you take, because I can tell you that going to a business school, it is not a liberal haven of just, oh, actually, Karl Marx is great. Like, dude, I went to business school. Step out of your bubble, your elitist bubble of being on Fox News, and engage with regular people that go to school, that go to college, that go to high school, that are working in middle schools, working in elementary schools, etc. They're not teaching. This is the same thing with sex ed. I mean, I hosted an educational event last week with a group called Advocates for Inclusive Education around what's happening in Central Bucks School Board. And people asked about what happens with sex ed and how it applies to potential other curriculums. And one of the people that was a volunteer for the Dole Sun Democrats actually was talking about when she was an elementary school teacher, which wasn't that very long. Well, it wasn't very long ago. They adjust age-wise the curriculum, specifically something like sex ed, and saying like, hey, if you're in elementary school, you teach kids that they shouldn't be touched in places where they would have a bathing suit. It's like the basis of teaching kids what is right and what is wrong. Because if they can't identify something that is wrong, then when they get older, how are they supposed to engage in reality and engage in the real world and protect themselves, protect each other, protect their kids? I mean, it seems simple. So I don't understand. I don't understand the level of just like blatant disregard and unscrutiny, I should say. I don't know. But here is, all right. Now we're going to talk, we're going to move away from culture, because remember, the Republicans are fighting culture wars against imaginary Flying Dutchmen. And now, because the Republicans control the House of Representatives, now we have some people that are empowered that want to really stick it to people. Those grumpy old men and old women that want, ew, you want Social Security? What are you, some sort of liberal? Here is Republican representative that wants to raise the retirement age for people to qualify for Social Security, and then they want to cut Social Security, because this is a way to cut Social Security, because, quote, we want, these people want to work more.
What raising the age of retirement?
You know, that's interesting that you asked that question.
This is Representative Rick Allen from Georgia.
Come up to me, they actually don't work on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He said they actually want to work longer.
That's on the table, you're saying?
Well, you know, if people want to work longer, maybe you need to give them an incentive to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the way to solve every one of these problems, by the way.
I know.
And actually, grow wealth at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Just take that right there.
So he said, and I'm gonna read it exactly.
I know.
He said,
I know.
he said this is a way to give them, meaning these lazy old people that want to retire, because God forbid anybody wants to retire. It's not like you work for 50 years of your life and you deserve to retire. Not in Rick Allen's view, not in Rick Allen's America. You shouldn't. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about they don't want better for younger generations. They don't want even the same for younger generations. The baby boomers are on their way into retirement. Gen X is not going to be able to retire until they're in their 70s. Millennials are not going to. We're probably never going to get to retire. Gen Z, dude, you're going to be working. You're going to have like a probably some sort of processor hooked up to your corpse, making sure that you can work after you die. Like, this is the type of stuff that they want out of people. Rather than saying, hey, maybe Social Security, we could give it to everybody that wants it at the regular age, because we could just raise the cap on it, lift the cap entirely on it, and then you can fund it indefinitely. There's never going to be a problem ever again. Because remember that there is a regressive tax on Social Security. So this is what the Republicans want. So how do you fund this? Well, here is a House Republican bill that is proposing to, oh, that's way too big. Proposing to apply not a 5%, not a 7%, which I believe is what the Pennsylvania sales tax is. Not a 10%, not a 15%, not a 20%, not a 25%. A 30% sales tax on food, gas, medical care, which is already, it's not expensive enough. Rent, which is definitely not expensive enough. And of course, my eyes couldn't roll around in my head to exemplify how ludicrous this is. And everything else. for a 30% tax, where the Republican is quoted as saying, if you don't want to pay for it, don't buy it. Now, of course, this won't ever pass. A 30% sales tax will never pass. But this is the type of policy that we're dealing with. Economic policy like this is regressive. Now, I will quickly go over some regressive policy because just so we know what we are dealing with. The reason why a 30% sales tax is regressive is because 30% on top of food or rent or gas are necessities for American people. Now, if something's a necessity, that means it is probably a priority in your spending habits. So there is, and we've talked about it before. I'm sure I'll talk about it again. I'm talking about it in my book. There's almost a whole chapter around this type of wealth inequality issue. The marginal propensity to consume. It is on a scale from 0 to 1, although technically speaking, and again, I'm not an economist, but this is my interpretation of this. Technically speaking, a marginal propensity to consume can go over 1 because if you go into debt, you're technically spending more than you have. But 0 meaning that if you made $100, you spent 0 of it. Or a 1, which is if you made $100, you spent all $100. The lower you are on the income distribution, the higher, most likely, the higher your marginal propensity to consume is because you have less income. Thus, you have to spend more of your income to live. So if your rent is $1,500 a month, which is pretty low compared to a lot of places across this country at this point, if it's $1,500 and there was a 30% tax on it, or you have to spend $150 on groceries every 2 weeks, and there's a 30% sales tax on it, because remember that sales tax doesn't necessarily apply to certain necessities like food or clothing in certain places. Again, that's state by state, but this would be a federal one on top of the state ones. This is where the regressiveness hits, because a 30% tax on food would be, okay, if you make $40,000, 30% on what you buy would disproportionately be a larger percentage of your income than if you were, say, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. Or if you just drop it down a notch, maybe not billionaire, let's go to athletes, LeBron James, go to Alex Rodriguez. I don't know, just keep going down the income distribution. You go to actors, these people that have money. They're not impacted by it because they spend what they have because they just have it. Their marginal propensity to consume is lower because their overall income is higher. If you have $10 million, if you have $10 billion, your marginal propensity to consume is logistically next to impossible to be 1, because you can't possibly spend that much money without being like, oh, I'm going to buy the internet like Elon Musk is trying to do, right? Like, to spend that amount of money it wouldn't necessarily be consumption at that point either. So this is the type of policy we're getting from Republicans in response to inflation, in response to, frankly, a decent economy other than the inflation, which inflation is slowing. The deficit got cut, which nobody talks about. The deficit that the Republicans always complain about is lower than it was under Trump. So, again and again and again and again and again, this stuff is just, smacked down by sorry, I'm searching for something that I want to share with you all before. But yeah, basically it is just nonsense. The Republicans have no policy, and it is just a sham, honestly, at this point, that we are dealing with these kind of ludicrous proposals. So I'm going to go to... I apologize for not having this pulled up already, but this is something that I wanted to share with you as we close out. Yeah, here we go. Okay. The final thing here tonight is just a plug. I wanted to plug this kind of as like a follow-up to what the clip that we had on Monday was, but it was from our show last week. And it's a piggyback off of what I was talking about with regards to pushing back on the critical race theory talking points and the event we had last week too. But last week we talked about Policy 321 passing, which bans, and I didn't fully, because of the implementation being up in the air, I didn't fully emphasize this enough, but Policy 321 in Central Bucks bans pride flags. Like, it just outright bans pride flags, on top of what we talked about last week. And I wanted to kind of hit at the other pieces of what this could impact, because of, we've already talked about how things could hit, LGBTQ symbols, let's say, in previous episodes. But I should emphasize it again here, and I just want to plug this, and it'll be in the description after the show. In the Inquirer, Tabitha Delangelo, Mariam Mahmood, and Karen Smith are the 3 Democrats on the Central Bucks School Board. They have been shut out because the majority is 6-3, and they have not been able to pass anything that is going to actually represent the community. The Republicans are making a sham of my alma mater, and as I talked about last week. And it makes me disgusted. And I think you should go and read this article. I'm going to plug it. So if you are listening to the show, go to the description of this episode, or you can go on YouTube and go and find the link there, because this is worth acknowledging, promoting, sharing, and lifting these people up, because they are fighting a battle on the Central Bucks School Board that is, frankly, at this point, a losing battle. And the only way that we can fix it is by promoting what they're doing and electing better people than the Republicans that are sitting on the board right now. With that being said, that was speed round of the Greater Society podcast, although I still went over an hour slightly, which is crazy. I apologize for my craziness. This is probably as, you're going to get me, as good as you're going to get me over the next couple of months as I'm in tax season. But if you guys have, and I'm going to put this up here front because I think it's important. If you have guest suggestions that you would like me to have an interview with, because that's easier than me putting together shows like this, pulling everything together, please let me know. You can shoot me a message on Twitter, or you can email the show at greatersocietymedia@gmail.com. While you're here, though, if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and get us over 100. Yes, 100. It's not that big of a number. 100 subscribers. We are 5 short, just 5 short. So I know that probably 5 people that are not subscribed will see this show at some point. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the thumbs up if you're watching. If you're already subscribed, hitting that thumbs up button really does help. It gets us in the algorithm. Then you can share the show on social media. You can follow me on Twitter at Con O'Hanlon. You can follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Greater Society Media. You can join the Discord server with the link in the description of this video or the description of the podcast episode. And you can support the show at patreon.com/Greater Society Media for as little as $5 a month. And if you would like to listen to the show, maybe you're driving, maybe you're working like me, you're working your butt off during tax season, you need something to listen to while you're plugging away, you can listen to the show on any podcast app, Apple, Google, Stitcher, whatever it is. You can find it on any of those platforms. And, give us a review while you're there. With all that being said, thank you so much for hanging out. Go check this article out while you can. And until next week, stay safe, stay sane, as I will try to do. Go Giants this weekend. And I will see you all next week. Peace.